My wealthy mother-in-law, Sylvia, has treated me like a servant for years. I've finally had enough and devised a flawless plan to take back my power. Alex's words sliced through the clatter of dishes like a sharp gust of wind. Alara, get me some tea now. His hands were freshly washed, still dripping. Hold on, I'm washing the dishes. What? His tone was sharp and commanding. Stop dawdling and bring the tea immediately. Can't you handle simple tasks? I started to protest, but another voice interrupted. What a useless woman you are! Make me a sweet coffee instead. Sylvia, my mother-in-law, called from the living room. She sat there, nibbling on a slice of cake she'd taken from the fridge, her eyes glinting with malice. I sighed, glancing at the pile of dishes. There were so many. Leave them for later. Just do what we say, you worthless woman. Alex's voice rang out, each word cutting deeply. I was Alara, a 28-year-old working mother whose life felt more like a cage than a home. Married at 23, I had hoped for love and companionship, but found myself trapped under the control of Alex and his overbearing mother. Our 4-year-old son was the only light in an otherwise bleak existence. We lived in Alex's family home, a choice made to support Sylvia's needs after my father-in-law's passing. At first, I empathized with her loneliness, but it soon became clear I was merely a pawn in her cruel game of domestic domination. Cooking, cleaning, and working weren't enough. My efforts were met with disdain, my meals either ignored or harshly criticized. This roast is so bland, Sylvia would sneer. Cook it properly next time. I'm busy and can only manage simple dishes, I'd reply, trying to keep my voice calm. That's why I teach my daughter-in-law to cook from the start. Why can't you? You're supposed to be a good cook, aren't you? I tried to respond once, but quickly learned it was pointless. Why would I waste my time cooking with you here? She'd retort, her words cold and dismissive. Their cruelty grew over time, from biting remarks to a chilling indifference. They began to disregard me entirely, as if I were a ghost in my own home. My presence, once barely tolerated, now seemed completely invisible. 5 years passed in this oppressive environment. Alex and I were 35 and 33, respectively. Our son grew, but the toxic atmosphere in the house remained unchanged. Sylvia, now 63, seemed to thrive on my misery. One evening, after returning from work, a heavy realization hit me. They saw my existence as insignificant. I was a shadow, unnoticed and unheard. The only voice that acknowledged me was my son's. The thought of losing even that small spark was unbearable. When I got home, I started cooking to lift my spirits. I prepared mapo tofu, grilled chicken, and a stir-fry with bell peppers and onions to bring some normalcy to our dinner. Pass the mayo, Alex demanded, breaking his long silence. Here you go, I said, handing it over. His first words to me in hours weren't thanks or conversation, just another order. It was the final straw, shattering my patience and tolerance. Sylvia demanded I clean the bathroom. What? Right now? I asked, stunned. Yes, now, she snapped, her voice dripping with venom. I pushed back, struggling to contain my frustration. Don't say things like that while we're eating. It's disgusting, just like your attitude, she shot back. Our argument escalated quickly, with Alex stepping in, demanding I apologize to his mother. But for the first time in years, I stood my ground. The conflict reached its peak, and a resolve formed within me. I had to escape this toxic environment, not just for myself, but for my son. I retreated to my room, my determination solidifying. I drafted divorce papers, completed them, and placed them in front of Alex. His shock was evident, but I felt only icy resolve. I'm filing these, I declared, my voice steady. As I stood there, watching his bewildered expression, I realized I had finally stepped out of the shadows. It was time to reclaim my life. The days after announcing the divorce were a whirlwind of cold glares and biting remarks, but amid the chaos, I found an unexpected sense of freedom. Sylvia eyed the meal I served one evening with disgust. You call this food? A child could do better. I bit my lip, focusing on my son's joyful expression. Eat up, sweetheart. I made your favorite tonight. Alex chimed in, his voice laced with sarcasm. Oh, playing the perfect mother now, are you? What a farce. I felt my anger rise, but kept my composure. I'm just trying to make a nice meal for our son, Sylvia scoffed. Don't act superior. You're nothing but a burden in this house. The tension at the table was palpable. Alex's attempts to belittle me intensified. So, Alara, have you thought about how you'll survive after the divorce? You can barely manage a household, let alone your own life. I met his gaze unflinchingly. I've been supporting this family for years. I'm not worried about taking care of myself and our son. His smirk faltered, a flicker of worry crossing his face. Sylvia jumped in. "Don't be ridiculous. You need us more than we need you." The conversation shifted to finances, a topic they usually avoided. "You do realize that without my income, this household would collapse," I said. "More to myself than to them." Sylvia sneered. "We'd manage. We don't need your charity." But Alex's silence spoke volumes. He knew the truth. Without me, they'd be in serious financial trouble. Their behavior worsened over the next few days. Sylvia alternated between trying to sweet-talk me into staying and hurling insults when I refused. Alex, on the other hand, seemed lost, his arrogance crumbling as the reality of his financial dependence sank in. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation that chilled me to the core. "She can't just leave us like this," Alex growled. "We need her money." Sylvia's response was cold and calculated. "Don't worry, I have a plan. We'll make her life so miserable she won't want to leave." Hearing their true intentions laid bare was a revelation. They didn't care about me or our son. It was all about control and money. That night, as I lay in bed, a plan began to form in my mind. If they wanted a fight, I'd give them one, but not with words or petty arguments. I'd hit them where it hurt most, their pride and their wallet. The next morning, I set my plan in motion. I contacted a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman highly recommended by a friend. "I want a divorce, and I want to ensure they don't get a cent more than they deserve," I told her. She nodded, her eyes gleaming with determination. "You've been the sole breadwinner, correct? We'll use that to our advantage." My resolve strengthened with each passing day. I began documenting everything: insults, financial manipulation, even minor slight. It was time to turn the tables. It was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. As I built my case, I felt a surge of empowerment. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my own destiny. The shadows of contempt were lifting, revealing a new horizon. As the divorce proceedings began, the atmosphere in the house grew more venomous. Yet, with each day, my fear faded, replaced by a steely determination. One evening, Sylvia tried a new tactic. "Alara, dear, why don't we put all this unpleasantness behind us? You know we're family." Her words rang hollow. I met her gaze steadily. "Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me." Alex, who had been watching silently, scoffed. "Oh, playing the victim now? You're not as innocent as you pretend?" I felt a surge of anger but kept my voice calm. "I'm not playing anything, Alex. I'm just done being your punching bag." As usual, the conversation turned to finances. "You think you can just take our son and leave? How will you support him?" Alex challenged. I smiled, a small, confident curve of my lips. "I've been supporting this family for years. I think I can manage." Sylvia's gaze turned venomous. "You're nothing without us. You'll come crawling back." But their words no longer held power over me. I knew my worth and the truth. The next day, I met with my lawyer again. She laid out the strategy clearly. "We'll highlight their financial dependence on you. It'll be pivotal in the custody battle and asset division." I nodded, feeling vindicated. The law was on my side, and I was ready to fight. At home, the tension reached a breaking point. Sylvia's attempts to discredit me grew increasingly desperate. "You think you're so clever," she sneered one evening. "But you're just a heartless woman abandoning her family." I looked her in the eye. "No, I'm a woman finally standing up for herself." Alex jumped in, his voice thick with anger. "You'll regret this. You can't survive without me." But his threats fell flat. I was done being intimidated. As the days passed, my preparations for the court battle intensified. I gathered financial records, documented their cruel remarks, and collected evidence of their neglect. One afternoon, as I organized my files, my son approached me. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" I pulled him into a hug, a wave of protectiveness washing over me. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to be just fine. We're leaving this place and starting a new, happy life. Just you and me." His arms tightened around me, and I knew I'd made the right choice. I was fighting not just for myself, but for my son's future. The court hearing date loomed, bringing with it the promise of freedom. I was ready to face Alex and Sylvia and end their reign of tyranny and emotional abuse. I was ready to reclaim my life and give my son the peace and happiness he deserved. It was time for justice, and I was determined to see it served. The day of the court hearing arrived, filled with both apprehension and resolve. Sitting across from Alex and Sylvia in the courtroom felt surreal. This was the moment everything would change. The proceedings began with cold formality. Alex's lawyer painted him as a devoted husband and father unfairly accused. Sylvia played the role of the wronged mother-in-law, betrayed by her ungrateful daughter-in-law. But their act was transparent, their lies fragile. When my turn came, I spoke with clarity and confidence. I've been the sole provider for this family for years. My husband's unemployment and his mother's manipulative behavior have been constant sources of stress. Alex interrupted, his voice tinged with faint hurt. Alara, how can you say such things? I've always supported you. I turned to him, my gaze unwavering. Support is more than words, Alex. It's about actions, and yours have shown only selfishness and cruelty. The judge listened intently as I presented my evidence. Financial records, audio recordings of their verbal abuse, and testimonies from neighbors who had witnessed their behavior. The truth was undeniable. As the evidence mounted, Alex's facade began to crumble. Sylvia's composure shattered, her mask of innocence slipping away. The courtroom fell silent, the air heavy with tension. Then came the revelation that sealed their fate. My lawyer presented photographs and documents proving Alex's infidelity and Sylvia's secret affair with Mr. Harwood, a wealthy neighbor. Murmurs erupted in the courtroom as the compromising images were displayed. Their deception was laid bare for all to see. Alex's face turned pale, his eyes wide with shock. Sylvia's face contorted with rage, her hands trembling. You invaded our privacy!" she shrieked, her voice piercing. I looked at her, my voice calm but firm. "Number, I exposed the truth you both hid for far too long. The court called for order, but the damage was done. Their credibility was destroyed, their lies exposed in the harsh light of the courtroom. As the session ended, the judge's ruling was clear. I was granted full custody of our son, and a fair division of assets was ordered. Alex and Sylvia were left with only their tarnished reputations. Walking out of the courtroom, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The years of deceit and emotional torment were over. I had faced my oppressors and emerged victorious. But the greatest moment came when my son ran into my arms outside the courthouse, his face glowing with relief and joy. "We did it, Mom!" he exclaimed, his voice brimming with happiness. "Yes, we did," I said, holding him close. "We're free now. This is just the beginning for us." As we walked away hand in hand, I realized this was more than a personal victory. It was a triumph for anyone who has ever felt diminished, powerless, or unworthy. It was a victory for truth and justice. It was the start of a new chapter, filled with hope and the promise of a brighter future. The court's decision had an immediate and dramatic impact. The story of Alex and Sylvia's deceit spread like wildfire, ruining their standing in our small community. They could no longer hide behind their veneer of respectability. In the days following the ruling, I focused on rebuilding my life with my son. But I couldn't deny the satisfaction of knowing Alex and Sylvia were facing the consequences of their actions. One evening, as I prepared dinner, an unexpected visitor arrived. Mrs. Harwood, Mr. Harwood's wife, stood at my door, her eyes red from unshed tears. "Alara, I heard about everything. I can't believe what Sylvia did," she said, her voice breaking. I invited her in, offering a cup of tea. As we sat at the kitchen table, she poured out her grief. "I trusted her as a friend." Her voice shook, and I listened, offering words of comfort. Sylvia's actions had caused far more harm than she'd intended. The next day, I saw Alex in town. He was a shadow of his former self, his arrogance replaced by a defeated demeanor. "Alara, please, can we talk?" he asked, his voice barely audible. I stopped, facing him. "What's there to discuss, Alex?" He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "I'm sorry for everything. I didn't realize how much I depended on you and your strength." His apology, though belated, reflected the shift in power. He had lost everything, his pride, his home, his family, and in that loss, he'd finally acknowledged his flaws. Sylvia, however, faced the harshest backlash. Her affair with Mr. Harwood had not only destroyed her reputation, but also led to legal troubles. Mrs. Harwood filed for divorce and sued her for alienation of affection. I learned of Sylvia's plight through neighbors. Whispers and stories painted a picture of a woman undone by her own actions. She had become an outcast, shunned by those she once called friends. One day at the grocery store, our paths crossed. For a brief moment, our eyes met. The mix of hatred and defeat in her gaze was unmistakable. "You did this to me," she muttered as she passed. I watched her retreat, her figure fading as she hurried away, her eyes burning with resentment. I felt an odd blend of pity and vindication. "No, Sylvia," I whispered to myself. "You did this to yourself." The tides of justice had turned. Everything they'd done to me, the lies, the manipulation, the emotional torment, had come full circle. The consequences of their actions were now inescapable. I watched them struggle, living in the wreckage of the deceit they'd carefully woven over the years. Their false facade had crumbled, and they were forced to confront the reality of what they'd become. As I observed their downfall, I felt a quiet satisfaction. But it wasn't just about them getting what they deserved. The true reward was the freedom I'd gained. The best form of retribution, I realized, wasn't in revenge, but in living a life filled with peace and strength, free from the toxicity and control they'd imposed on me for so long. My focus returned to what truly mattered, building a future with my son. We were free now, liberated from the prison they'd trapped me in for years. I had broken free and was living the life I'd always dreamed of. This wasn't just a story of revenge or victory. It was a story of liberation. It was a testament to my strength and resilience. I had taken control of my destiny, shattered the chains of abuse, and freed myself from the tyranny of their manipulation. As I looked to the future, I knew it was bright, and the best was yet to come. I was no longer a prisoner to their cruelty. Thank you for watching my story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and stay tuned for more real-life experiences.